What if the first human families, surrounded by darkness, predators, and the constant threat of extinction, discovered something deeper than mere survival instincts? Imagine standing beside them, hearing the distant growls of giant beasts, feeling the earth tremble under the weight of creatures far stronger than any weapon they possessed. In a world without walls, without tools of defense, without certainty of tomorrow, where did they turn when fear pressed against their chests and danger circled their children? This question echoes through time because the answer they found was not physical. It was spiritual. Long before organized religion, before symbols were carved into cave walls, before the idea of gods had shape or name, these early families searched for meaning in the unknown. They looked upward, inward, and toward one another, trying to understand why the world seemed eager to erase them and how unseen forces might help them endure another night. Their footsteps left more than tracks in the dirt. They left messages we are only now beginning to decode, whispers hidden in the silence of prehistory. Every fire they lit was a plea for protection, every rhythmic sound a call to something beyond human understanding, every gesture a signal meant to reach a presence they could sense but not see. Fear became a gateway to intuition, and intuition shaped the earliest forms of spiritual communication. These ancestral families were not just running from predators. They were reaching for protection from forces greater than themselves, hoping that the unseen world responded when the physical world threatened to crush them. Have you ever felt surrounded by challenges the same way they were? Their search for spiritual aid mirrors a feeling that still exists today, a quiet instinct telling us that meaning can rise from danger and that guidance may appear in moments of deep vulnerability. What you are about to uncover might surprise you because the past did not vanish. It still speaks, and its messages remain alive beneath layers of time. Before we go deeper, share your thoughts in the comments and let me know if you have ever sensed something greater guiding you. Your like helps this message reach more people, and make sure you are subscribed so you do not lose the next insights waiting for you as we continue moving forward into the world of our earliest ancestors, where every shadow carried a lesson and every silence held a sign. Life for the first human. Families unfolded under a constant veil of uncertainty, where every sunrise offered hope and every nightfall threatened to erase entire bloodlines. Their shelters were temporary, carved out of instinct rather than architecture, and every decision carried the weight of survival. Imagine a world where the rustle of leaves might mean a lurking predator, where the cracking of branches announced a danger that could strike without warning, and where storms, darkness, and hunger shaped the rhythm of existence. Vulnerability was not an occasional feeling, but the atmosphere they breathed. In this fragile environment, their minds became finely tuned to patterns, signs, and sensations that modern humans often ignore. Fear sharpened their perception, and perception created meaning. When they saw the flicker of distant lightning or heard the deep roar of an unseen creature, they interpreted these moments not just as threats, but as messages carried by the world around them. These early families lived in small groups, relying on each other the way we rely on entire societies today. A single misstep could cost a life, and a single night of weakness could invite predators to approach. Their children slept pressed close to the adults, seeking warmth and protection while the elders kept their senses alert. This level of vulnerability shaped their psychology, teaching them to see significance in every shift of wind, every movement of shadows, every echo that vibrated through the landscape. The sense of being watched, protected, or warned by invisible forces emerged long before anyone carved symbols into walls. In the face of relentless threats, the human mind reached for something beyond the physical, believing that help could come from realms unseen. This emotional environment nurtured the earliest seeds of spirituality, not as a structured belief, but as a deep inner response to fear, awe, and uncertainty. They learned to interpret the world as if it were speaking to them, as if every moment held a hidden intention. Survival was not simply a battle of strength, but a dialogue between human intuition and the powerful forces of nature. These instincts would become the foundation for the symbols, rituals, and spiritual messages that later generations would inherit and reinterpret as they continued searching for meaning in a world that never stopped testing their endurance. As the earliest humans struggled to understand the hostile world around them, their minds began shaping the foundations of what we now call the sacred. Before any formal ritual existed, before a spoken language could fully express abstract ideas, something remarkable was already happening inside their consciousness. They started noticing that certain shapes, patterns, and marks left by nature seemed to repeat themselves. The curve of an animal's footprint, the jagged line of a lightning strike, the spiral formed by wind on dust or sand, all became signs that stirred their imagination. These impressions were not just random images. To them, they were signals. When danger approached, the earth trembled. When food was near, birds reacted differently. When storms were coming, the air carried a certain weight. Slowly, the idea that forces beyond human control were leaving messages began to take hold. These first symbolic interpretations emerged from raw survival instincts, but they evolved into something deeper. When families gathered around firelight, the flickering shadows on cave walls created shapes that seemed alive, shifting between the worlds of the visible and the invisible. Those shadows offered more than warmth. They offered meaning. Some marks they made accidentally on stone during hunting preparations later appeared to resemble animals or spirits, and soon these marks were repeated intentionally. The first symbols were born not from artistic desire but from psychological necessity. They needed ways to externalize fear, hope, and intuition. Each symbol, no matter how simple, became a silent dialogue between human beings and the unknown. Even without spoken explanations, these early signs carried emotional weight. A handprint on a wall was more than a decoration. It was a declaration of presence, a request for protection, a testimony that someone had survived long enough to leave a mark behind. When children touched those handprints, they felt connected not only to their kin, but to something greater that seemed to watch over their fragile existence. In these early gestures, the boundary between physical reality and spiritual imagination blurred. What began as a way to understand nature slowly evolved into the first attempts to communicate with forces they believed were guiding them. These primitive symbols would later serve as the foundation for rituals that helped families navigate the constant attacks and unpredictable challenges of prehistoric life, carrying forward the sense that every sign in the world had a deeper meaning waiting to be uncovered. In the heart of prehistory, when the sun disappeared and the world fell into a silence broken only by distant roars, early human families turned toward rituals as their most powerful form of protection. These rituals did not begin as elaborate ceremonies. They were simple gestures, born from instinct and repeated because they brought a sense of safety in a world overflowing with danger. When a predator stalked the camp or unfamiliar sounds echoed in the darkness, families whispered. Soft tones to calm their children, traced shapes in the dirt to invoke memories of past survival, and gathered tightly around their fires, believing the flame itself carried a protective force. Over time, these repeated actions gained symbolic meaning. A certain rhythm of clapping or striking stones together mimicked the heartbeat of the group, reminding everyone that unity could push back fear. The vibration of these sounds traveled through the ground, making them feel as though they were calling out to an invisible guardian for help. In moments when danger felt closest, family elders stepped forward, performing movements meant to ward off unseen threats. They raised their arms to the sky, touched the earth with both hands, and breathed deeply as if drawing strength from elements they could not name. Even without spoken language, the intention behind these actions was clear. They believed that the world responded to their gestures, that every movement carried meaning, and that the boundary between physical and spiritual realms was thin enough to cross. Children watched these rituals with wide eyes, absorbing each gesture as a lesson about how to face the fear that shaped their existence. They learned that protection was not just physical. It came from aligning themselves with forces greater than their small groups. These rituals created a psychological fortress. Even when predators prowled nearby or storms shook the ground, the act of gathering, chanting, and repeating familiar motions helped families endure the moment. Within these actions lived the earliest form of spiritual communication, a way to signal to whatever forces might be watching that they were not helpless. Every ritual, no matter how simple, became a bridge between vulnerability and hope. As these practices spread from family to family, they evolved, gaining layers of meaning that shaped the spiritual foundation of generations to come. And through these rituals, the earliest humans began to understand that survival was more than endurance. It was connection to something beyond themselves, something that seemed to guide them when the world grew darkest. If any part of this speaks to you, share your thoughts in the comments. What symbols or gestures from your own life feel like echoes of something ancient? As early humans continued facing an unpredictable world, their minds began shaping the figure of a spiritual guardian, an unseen presence they believed watched over their fragile existence. This guardian was not imagined as a fully formed deity, nor as a being with a defined face or voice. Instead, it emerged from the collective experience of fear, intuition, and the strange comfort that arose when they acted together as a group. When danger approached, they reacted with a unity that felt guided. When they escaped a threat that should have ended them, it seemed impossible to accept that it had been mere luck. Over countless generations, these moments layered themselves into a quiet belief that something beyond human strength intervened. This belief became the root of the guardian spirit, a psychological creation that provided direction when the world offered none. The guardian took shape through patterns in nature. A sudden gust of wind that appeared after a desperate plea for help, the appearance of certain animals before moments of safety, or the rhythm of distant thunder that seemed to answer their cries. These experiences reinforced the idea that they were not alone. The guardian was everywhere and nowhere, present not through form but through impact. It became the invisible companion of every hunt, every migration, every night spent waiting for shadows to reveal what moved within them. Families passed down stories of moments when a sign appeared at just the right time, teaching children to look for guidance in the smallest details. In this way, the guardian spirit became a shared psychological anchor, helping each individual face threats with a sense of inner strength. This emerging belief also changed how they organized themselves. The oldest members of the group, considered closest to the unseen world because of their accumulated experience, were often asked to interpret signs. They watched the sky, listened to sounds beneath the wind, and explained unusual events as movements of the guardian. This gave structure to their understanding of danger and comfort. Even the simple act of placing a hand on another person's shoulder in a moment of fear became a symbolic reminder that the guardian worked through unity. As these early humans relied more on this imagined protector, their sense of purpose deepened. They began to feel that life itself carried meaning beyond survival, as if they were part of a larger design. This connection to the guardian spirit would inspire the symbols, cave markings, and rituals that future generations used to preserve the messages of those who faced the world before them, creating a thread of belief that would stretch far into the human story. Deep within the caves that sheltered early human families, messages began to accumulate like echoes of a silent dialogue between generations. These dark, humid chambers were more than refuges from storms and predators. They were sanctuaries where fear met imagination, and where the boundaries between the physical world and the spiritual realm seemed to dissolve. When families gathered inside, firelight revealed surfaces that had never been touched. Those empty walls invited expression, urging them to leave something behind that could outlive a single night of survival. The first marks were simple: lines carved with sharpened stones, shapes traced with charcoal, fingerprints pressed into soft clay. But soon, these marks gained purpose. They became warnings, prayers, and coded messages for anyone who entered after them. Each symbol carried the emotional weight of the moment in which it was created. A spiraling line might represent the path of an approaching predator. A series of dots could indicate a safe direction to travel when daylight returned. The outline of a hand served as both a declaration of presence and a plea for protection, an intimate gesture meant to bridge the gap between the visible and the invisible. As more families passed through these caves over time, they began recognizing repeating symbols, patterns that felt too intentional to ignore. They interpreted these marks as spiritual guidance, believing the ancestors who made them were reaching across generations to offer support. In this way, the caves became repositories of lived experience transformed into sacred instruction. Firelight played a crucial role in this transformation. When flames flickered, the shadows on the walls moved in ways that made the symbols appear alive. A carved animal might seem to leap forward. A spiral might seem to expand and contract like a breathing organism. These illusions were more than visual accidents. They fed the belief that the messages carried spiritual energy. Children watched these shifting shapes with awe, feeling as though the walls themselves were speaking. Adults, already accustomed to reading signs in nature, carried these interpretations into their rituals, reinforcing the idea that the caves were thresholds between worlds. Through these symbolic messages, early humans developed a shared understanding of danger, safety, and spiritual connection. Each mark was not just an artistic expression, but a tool for survival, infused with meaning that guided their decisions. These messages also created a sense of continuity between families who would never meet, binding them together through a language of symbols. As generations returned to these caves, the accumulated messages formed a map of ancestral wisdom, shaping how they faced attacks, migrations, and uncertainties. And as these marks multiplied, the belief that unseen forces communicated through them grew stronger, preparing the way for moments when the entire group would act together as one unified source of spiritual power. As early human families faced the relentless pressure of predators and shifting landscapes, they discovered that their greatest spiritual strength emerged not from isolation, but from unity. When danger approached, individuals did not scatter. They moved closer together, instinctively forming a protective circle around the most vulnerable members of the group. In these moments, something powerful happened. Their breathing synchronized, their footsteps aligned, their voices merged into a single rhythm, whether through humming, chanting, or striking objects in steady patterns. This collective resonance became a force of its own, a kind of spiritual shield created through shared intention. Even without understanding the mechanics of sound or vibration, they sensed that their unified presence altered the atmosphere around them, giving courage where fear once dominated. This unity transformed their rituals into something deeper. Each movement, each chant, each repeated gesture felt amplified when performed together. The more cohesive the group became, the stronger their belief grew that they were calling upon forces greater than any one individual. The sound of rhythmic clapping echoed through valleys, bouncing off stone walls and returning as if the land itself were answering. Children clung to the adults, absorbing the vibrations through their bodies, learning that safety emerged from connection. In this shared rhythm, early humans found a kind of spiritual anchoring that allowed them to withstand attacks, storms, and long nights without losing hope. The act of standing together became its own form of prayer. This collective energy also shaped how they faced uncertainty. When they prepared for a difficult hunt or sensed approaching danger, they gathered to perform rituals that relied on the power of the group. The rising of voices in unison created a sense of being accompanied by something unseen, a guardian that responded only when the group acted with one heart. Over time, these shared practices turned into the foundation of community identity. The belief that their strength multiplied when united helped them endure challenges that no family could survive alone. Their rituals became living expressions of spiritual connection, demonstrating that the invisible world seemed to respond most strongly when humans acted together with purpose. These ancient moments remind us that the first families did not survive only through physical effort, but through a deep emotional bond that made them feel guided, protected, and spiritually supported. And though thousands of years have passed, the echoes of those shared rhythms still resonate in the human psyche, shaping our instinct to seek unity when life becomes overwhelming. If this idea of collective strength speaks to you, share your thoughts in the comments. What moments of unity in your own life have felt like a form of protection? As generations passed, the survival of early human families depended not only on physical strength, but on the careful transmission of knowledge that carried both practical and spiritual meaning. Elders became the living libraries of their groups, preserving memories of attacks, migrations, unusual signs in the environment, and the rituals that had once protected their ancestors. Their stories were not told with structured language, but through gestures, sounds, and symbols repeated with precision. Children learned to recognize patterns long before they understood their full meaning. A cluster of stones arranged in a certain way signaled danger. A carved spiral meant that the path ahead had once been safe. A sequence of handprints marked places where families had survived a great ordeal. Each message was both a record of the past and a guide for the future. This transmission was not simply educational, it was emotional. Younger members understood that these teachings came from people who had lived through real fear, who had lost family members, who had found hope in signs that appeared at critical moments. When elders touched a symbol on a cave wall, their expression conveyed more than words ever could. It told the story of a night when protection arrived unexpectedly, or a morning when the group escaped a predator because someone recognized a sign left generations before. In this way, the symbols became layered with meaning, each new event adding another thread to the tapestry of ancestral wisdom. Families traveling across harsh landscapes relied on these messages as if they were voices from the past, guiding them step by step. Whenever they encountered a mark they did not understand, they studied it intently, trying to interpret the emotional intention behind it. Was it carved quickly, suggesting fear? Was it etched carefully, as though intended for long-term guidance? These distinctions mattered, shaping decisions that determined whether they would survive another day. Over time, the ability to interpret these ancestral messages became as essential as knowing how to track animals or find water. Spiritual meaning and practical survival fused into a single worldview. This ongoing exchange across generations created a sense of continuity that gave early humans strength. Even when families moved to new regions, they carried the memory of old symbols with them, adapting them to new environments while preserving their original essence. Each generation believed it was connected to something older and wiser than itself, a chain of guidance stretching far into the past. And through this chain, they developed a deeper understanding of their place in the world. They were not isolated individuals facing danger alone. They were inheritors of a legacy built from courage, intuition, and the belief that meaning could emerge even in the harshest conditions. This transmission of spiritual and symbolic knowledge would shape how they navigated threats and how they understood the unseen forces that seemed to accompany them through every trial. Over countless generations, the spiritual awareness of early humans deepened as their experiences shaped a more complex understanding of the world around them. What began as instinctive reactions to danger slowly evolved into an internal framework that blended emotion, intuition, memory, and imagination. They sensed patterns in the movement of animals, in the changing seasons, in the rhythm of storms, and in the silence that settled before threats appeared. These observations were not merely practical. To them, the world felt alive, responsive, and filled with hidden intent. Every shift in nature seemed to signal something, and deciphering those signals became essential not only for survival, but for maintaining a sense of order in a world that offered none. This growing awareness created the foundation of what we now call spiritual consciousness. Early humans began to believe that every place held a specific energy, that certain valleys offered protection, while others carried danger, and that caves, rivers, and mountains were not just landscapes, but entities with personalities of their own. This belief shaped their choices, guiding them toward areas where they felt watched over or away from places that seemed to carry warnings. Their connection to the land was emotional and intuitive, a dialogue between their inner world and the forces they believed surrounded them. Over time, this relationship gave rise to early myths, stories expressed through motions, expressions, and carved symbols that captured the essence of their lived experiences. As families reflected on moments when they narrowly escaped predators or found unexpected sources of safety, these events transformed into spiritual lessons. A sudden shift in the wind before an attack was not coincidence. It was a message. A distant sound heard at the right moment was not random. It was guidance. These interpretations strengthened their belief that the unseen world communicated continuously with those who paid attention. This mindset shaped their rituals, their symbols, and even their emotional resilience. Instead of seeing themselves as powerless beings in a hostile landscape, they began to view themselves as part of a larger system of meaning where every experience carried a purpose. This evolving consciousness also shaped the identity of their communities. Shared beliefs created cohesion. Collective interpretations reinforced unity. The more they aligned their understanding of the world, the more confident they became in facing dangers that once seemed insurmountable. And with each new generation, the emotional memory of past events blended with new symbols and rituals, creating a continuous line of spiritual development. This expanding awareness prepared them for deeper forms of expression that would soon emerge, forms capable of carrying their most important messages beyond the present moment and offering guidance to those who would come long after their voices had faded. As the messages left by the first human families accumulated across generations, they formed more than a record of survival. They created a living thread, connecting past and present, shaping the emotional and spiritual identity of those who followed. Each symbol carved into stone, each handprint left in the dark of ancient caves, carried the weight of a moment when someone faced danger and chose to leave guidance for others. These early humans understood that life extended beyond a single lifetime. They sensed that every fear endured and every insight gained could help someone they would never meet. This belief transformed their struggles into teachings and their victories into signs. Over time, these symbolic messages grew into a legacy that stretched farther than they could imagine. reminding future generations that even in the harshest conditions, meaning could be found in the smallest traces of human presence. This legacy influenced how families viewed themselves within the wider world. When they came across ancient markings during migrations, they paused, tracing their fingers along the grooves carved by ancestors long gone. The emotion in these moments was profound. They were not just observing history, they were participating in an ongoing conversation. The messages felt alive, guiding them towards safer ground, warning them of dangers, or giving them strength when their spirits weakened. These experiences reinforced the belief that spiritual connection was not abstract, but woven into the landscape itself. The world became a partner in their survival, offering signs and echoes that carried the intention of those who lived before them. This interplay between the physical world and ancestral memory shaped their understanding of purpose. Even as environments changed and threats evolved, the emotional power of these messages endured. They became a reminder that human beings, no matter how vulnerable, could leave marks powerful enough to guide others. The first families may not have understood the full impact of what they created, but their symbols formed the earliest maps of meaning, showing that guidance could emerge even in the silence of prehistory. Their courage, intuition, and desire to protect one another created a foundation that still influences how we interpret signs, seek connection, and find strength during moments of uncertainty. The presence of their messages suggests that the human spirit has always reached for something beyond survival, something that links us to those who came before and those who will follow. If these ancestral echoes resonate with you, feel free to leave a comment saying this sentence that reflects your connection to the story. This message was meant for me. Your like helps support work like this, and if you want to keep exploring these ancient insights, make sure you are subscribed so you can follow the next chapters of this journey. There is another video waiting for you that expands on these ideas. So take a moment and continue with me as we keep traveling through the signs our ancestors left behind.